Climate change, it's happening all around us. More and more young people are rising up to tackle climate change. But what really is climate change?
Well, climate change is caused by increased greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. These greenhouse gases, like carbon dioxide and methane, are coming from mostly the burning of coal and gasoline, which are non-renewable resources. As these gases are entering the atmosphere, they are increasing the amount of infrared radiation that is trapped in the Earth system. And as that infrared radiation is trapped, it's causing the global temperature to go up. The amount of carbon dioxide and methane that we are seeing currently in the atmosphere far exceeds any amount that we've seen in the past about million years of the natural Earth cycle.
So, what does that really mean? It means that the ice caps are melting, the Earth is getting hotter, and more natural disasters are happening. The Earth is in a state of climate emergency. So, how much is this really going to cost?
So basically the question is, how much do I think it's going to cost for people to make small changes to reduce their environmental footprint, particularly their carbon footprint that's going to contribute to global climate change? And I really think a big part of that is changing consumption patterns. And that's not just like, say, not buying the newest thing. New TV comes out that has new features and be like, oh, I just got to have that new one. But it's also, how do you choose to recreate? Do you choose to drive your car for 3 hours total to take a hike? Or do you say, well, maybe I could explore the Beaverton area in a place I've never gone, or the Portland area in a place I've never gone, and use almost no gas to get there. So I think that it's thinking about, how do I get joy in my life? How do I get meaning in my life? How do I do the things that are important to me as a human being, for myself, for my family, while thinking, how can I do things that have the lowest footprint?
Let's pause for a second. You may have heard someone mention a carbon footprint before, but what really is it? A carbon footprint is the amount of greenhouse gases, primarily carbon dioxide, released into the atmosphere by particular human activity.
And I think the same thing with consumer choices. You think like, okay, what's my new hobby? Well, what things do I have to purchase to do that? Or could I go out to my garage and use something that I got that I was all excited about, 2 years ago, but haven't used in a couple of years, but maybe rediscover the joy of that. So for me, like returning to archery, which I already have pretty much everything I need to do it, rather than racing off to some cool new hobby or a new exciting thing for me. So that's often what I'm trying to do in my own life, is how do I already take advantage of what I've already owned that already has that embedded environmental cost to it, and not do something new just because it feels exciting or shiny. I think there are ways that are free or even have a negative cost to them that allow us to make improvements in our own lives in terms of our environmental footprint. To me, always be thinking about our own consumption patterns, and instead of thinking, what do I buy to be more green, what do I avoid buying? What do I avoid spending money on that actually allows me to be more green? And is there potential in that changing of consumption that actually increases the richness of my life, or the joy in my life, and for the people that I care about around me? So instead of thinking about what's the new thing that I could purchase, what could I do with what I already have that brings richness to my life? I think it depends on how you look at that. The cost of global warming is going to be tremendous. It's going to dramatically change coastlines, dramatically change cities. Depending on the country, of course, it's going to be a greater or larger amount. So certainly there is going to be a tremendous cost to society, especially if we look at places, say, like Miami, Florida, in our country. So there's that cost of addressing what global warming will do to us if we have a greater number of hurricanes, for example, or severe weather events, or we have a changing of climate, because not often when we look at global warming, we think of just everything getting warmer, but if it's changing our agricultural patterns and making some areas less or more productive, there's certainly going to be costs as we shift as a society. So in that sense, I think there's going to be a lot of costs inherent in taking care of what global climate change does to our country and to other countries. In order to slow global climate change and to slow the amount of CO2 and other atmospheric gases are being put up in the atmosphere, there are certainly going to be costs. And I think they're not costs that everyone can bear, as everyone is willing to bear, in the sense of changing their modes of transportation to more efficient ways. I think of, how am I more efficient? If it's something like buying less clothes, but buying higher quality clothing that's going to last longer. I mean, I want a shirt, if I'm going to wear it, to last 5 to 10 years, and rather than kind of seasonally changing. We often think of, like, to be green, let's buy something. I think that's a natural thing in a consumer society. So what is the water bottle I can buy, or what is the thing I can buy to improve my house? Instead of thinking, the real questions be, what can I not buy? What should I not buy? So, you buy a steel straw so you don't use disposable straws. but you're still going on international vacations or cross-country vacations purely for recreation. And I'm not saying we need to have a society where none of that happens, but if we don't all to some degree start limiting some of the consumption we do, we can't buy our way out of that consumption, or buy our way out of the situation. To some degree, if we really want to change environmental outcomes, climate outcomes, we have to consume less. So that should be cheaper. I think any of these decisions, you should have to look at a complicated set of factors.
I think there's many different solutions to climate change that people are trying to enact. I think that some of those solutions are small solutions. People like you and me can mitigate the amount of greenhouse gases that we're putting into the atmosphere by just switching our light bulbs out to LEDs so that we're using less electricity, or perhaps buying an electric car when it's time to buy a new car, or perhaps investing in renewable types of energy like wind and solar. These are small things that everyday citizens can do. However, there are large solutions also, and that would be like our Pacific Gas and Electric Company. They're really actively trying to completely get away from burning coal for electricity and moving totally towards hydroelectric, wind, and solar. The problem with renewables right now is that we don't have a way to store the energy that is being made. So we know that our days are much longer in the summer than they are in the winter, so we generate a lot of energy through solar in the summer. But we don't have really a way to save that energy for the wintertime when we might have increased needs for that energy. So I think that will be one of the problems that we need to figure out the solution for in the future, is that if we really want to go in the way of renewables, that we have to figure out a way to store that energy. I mean, I think that we know what the problem is and we know that what we can do, but I think if you were to go and survey 1,000 people, I think people sometimes know what they need to do, but sometimes actually following through with doing it is a little bit more challenging. Some of the options obviously are very costly. So while people want to drive an electric car, right now electric cars are quite a bit more costly than buying a gasoline car. And so ultimately, budget oftentimes determines what solutions that you can actually employ. The one great thing about technology that we know is that as technology lives in our society for a longer period of time, generally that technology comes down in price. So, it's my hope that eventually we can all be driving electric cars, and that will be something that's an affordable solution for all. But I think that there are solutions that everybody can do. But I think oftentimes people think, well, I'm just one person, or we're just one family, and so changing out the light bulbs isn't really going to make that much impact. But the reality is, if every family in Beaverton and every family in Oregon did that, it really would make a huge impact. I certainly didn't learn about climate change or global warming when I was in school, but that was over 20 years ago. Now what we try to do is we try to embed a different aspect into each one of the science classes. So for example, in physics, students really look at energy and energy conversion and looking at making a 50-year energy plan. When they get to chemistry, we try to embed it at looking at the greenhouse gases and seeing what the chemicals in the atmosphere are really doing to cause climate change. And then in biology, looking at how is that affecting the Earth's systems? How is that affecting, not how are humans impacting their environment then because of these increased greenhouse gases. So we try to make sure you get a little bit each year, because climate change is a big topic and you can't really cover it all in one year. I think most people are familiar with what climate change is. I think that they are differing in their opinions on, I think most people now accept that climate change is happening, but where the difference and the argument comes from is that there's still a large percentage of people that think that the climate change that we are experiencing right now is still a normal fluctuation in the Earth's system. But really, when we look at the data for carbon dioxide and methane, we can see that the carbon dioxide, for example, is like 100 parts per million more than it has ever peaked at before in the last million years. So I think that there is still that side of the argument that people are in denial that climate change is being caused by humans, that they really are still advocating that it is part of the Earth's normal cycling. I think that most students are aware of what climate change is, and I would say that on the whole, I think most students are more equipped and engaged with actually trying to do something about it, which is fantastic, because really it's going to be the biggest problem that your generation has to figure out, has to solve. I hope that your generation takes this problem seriously and really does start acting on it more, and really putting the pressure on older generations that they must act on it too, that we can't stay with our old ways, that we need to really, we're really seeing the effects of climate change really starting to speed up now. And so the time is now to really act and to make change in our society. And not only just here in the United States, obviously we're big users of energy, but really spreading that message all over the globe, because if we're going to be a global society, then everybody has to be in this to improve our Earth.